Welcome, Blissful Parenting Summit. I'm so happy you're here with us, and I'm so happy to be able to welcome our next speaker, who is a parent educator who's dedicated years to parents and families in all different contexts, to nurturing that parent role, to teaching into the parent role, and to empowering parents. Please help me welcome Kate Garzón, and she can tell us a little more about what brought you here and how.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here, Katie. I appreciate the opportunity to chat. And I love that you call it, blissful parenting, because so much of parenting is hard. And so the approach of feeling some of the joy and some of the bliss is really important, kind of the reward for all the work you put in.
Yes.
So
because of your broad background, I really wanted to just have you speak a little bit broadly about what it is to be a parent, what it is to be a human, what it is to be alive. And that brings us to that.
Of course.
You think it's one thing, but it's the experience of it matters. And I love your work. And I think of your work as being 3D. And maybe you could tell us about your work as you tell us about your vision.
So when you asked me, what is it to be alive and to be human, it actually made me think about many, many years ago when I was a teaching intern. I was a Montessori teacher for 18 years. And I'll never forget the woman who ended up being my first principal, but she was also an instructor in the teacher training program. She walked into the room. She had this presence about her. She walked into the room. She didn't say a word. She just wrote on the blackboard, adapt or die. And we all just sat there and we're like, wow, this is quite the start. Her point being, as humans, our choice is continue to learn, continue to grow, continue to evolve, or don't. And, I feel like that's what it is to be human. And the work that I do with parents is not striving for any kind of perfection. It's about getting to know yourself as a parent, getting to know the humans that you have, that you are responsible for, learning together and growing together. So being human and being a parent are very closely linked. If children have parents who are, perfect, then they never learn how to repair after a rupture, how to recognize when mistakes have been made, how to sort through all of the complicated things about being human. It means they're buffered from all of that. And then they get out into the world and they don't have any idea how to be around other people. So the beauty of it is parents make mistakes, they learn. Kids make mistakes, they learn. Everybody keeps growing. And it goes back to that adapt or die.
That is powerful mic drop moment. Wow. Wow. And it is exactly right that I feel like, especially the model that you work with and the approach you've brought to such a array of families speaks into that learning process as key to.
It's been a learning process for me too. I started, I think when we were chatting before, I mentioned that my work with children and families started when I was 7 and my youngest brother was born. And that was when I changed my first diaper. And it just sort of moved on from there through all of the different ways that one can be with kids. I was a babysitter and a camp counselor and a coach and a tutor. And then I went and did a degree in psychology and sociology with a focus in child development. I was a live-in nanny. And then that led me into Montessori education. And I did that for 18 years. That was for a whole age range, all the way from 2.5-year-olds through middle school. And I have had a lot of experience with adolescents as well in various capacities. So all of that sort of prepared me when I was ready to leave the formal education sphere and move into coaching. I realized that I'd been doing it for a long time. I was very fortunate. The schools I taught in, parent education was a huge piece. And I always loved connecting with parents. So when I started sort of this business, I called my company Guided Parenting Support. And the initials are GPS. So, I like to joke that I'm a GPS for the parents of toddlers through teens, because kids don't come with a roadmap. They arrive in your life and you can read all the books in the world, but how to apply those things to the humans that you have is the really hard part. And I can't tell you the number of parents I've worked with who've said like, wow, I really just needed permission to be gentler. I needed permission to roll with it. I was so afraid of raising a spoiled kid, an entitled kid, a kid who didn't know how to be responsible, that I've been so much harder on them than I needed to be. And the books don't tell me that it's okay to, you know, to sort of give them what they need. So my platform, I call it the GPS platform. I should probably call it GPS squared because there are 2 S's, but it starts with get it off your chest. You know, that's the G. So when parents come to me or when I'm working with schools, the first thing they need to do is have a safe space to unload what is on their heart and what is on their mind, because parenting is really lonely. And there's a lot of judgment, and everything on social media is very misleading. And so having a safe place where they can come and just leave it all, that's how we dive in and we discover where the pain points are. What are the frustrations? What are the things that are keeping them up at night? And then we move on to the P of GPS, which is protect your relationships. Every strategy that we work toward comes through the lens of protecting relationships. You know, we've talked about this, the work of Daniel Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson with downstairs brain, upstairs brain, right? Mona Hook with neuroception. You know, if kids and teens don't feel safe in their downstairs brain, they're going to constantly be on edge. They're going to constantly be looking for ways to protect themselves, to kind of armor themselves. And so resting in the love and respect and affection and connection of their parents is the best way to help them co-regulate and then self-regulate. So I always look at what's going on with the relationships. You know, I was working with a family last week where the dad was saying, well, I would enjoy this more if their behavior changed. And it's helping him come to understand that if his behavior changes, then they're going to change as a result. And so that protecting the relationships is so important. And then the 2 S's in the GPS, the next is scaling your expectations to match development. You know, helping parents understand what is actually realistic, not only for the age and stage, but also for the neurology and temperament of the kids that you have and the circumstances that you're in. When parents are helped to look through that lens of this is actually what I can expect, and this is what's totally normal, it takes the pressure off of them to constantly be rewarding and punishing or applying a consequence. And then the last piece is skill building, because humans skill build within what is developmentally appropriate when they feel really safe in those relationships. So it's a platform, because in a given day, if you've got 1 child or 5 children, you know, in a given day, you're going to be faced with 10,000 different scenarios, and you have to problem solve in the moment for all of those things. If you're trying to parent from a formula or a set of rules, it gets really confusing and really overwhelming. If you're trying to mimic a particular parenting style, then you do something that is outside of that style, and then you feel like you're no longer that type of parent. Whereas when you look at it through relationships, development, and skill building, no formula is needed. You just, you can just, you know, be with your kids, let them feel their feelings, feel what you're feeling, and then work on the building of whatever skills are needed once the co-regulation or the self-regulation have kicked back in. So
that's what I mean about 3D. It's not just a list of things or a manual or a roadmap even. It's GPS. It's interactive. It's
I'm
responsive.
in the passenger seat.
Yeah.
You know, and I it's funny. I didn't start off. My background is in Montessori, and Dr. Montessori was so unique because she didn't just wake up one day and decide she was going to create a philosophy and a curriculum and start applying it to children. She observed and interacted, and then out of what she noticed about development, that is how she created her curriculum, her philosophy. And you know, she was an experimenter. If something wasn't working, you try something else. And my own journey has mirrored that. I didn't set out coaching with a GPS platform. It was through years of doing it and realizing, pulling out what was already happening with parents and how everything landed in those buckets: protecting relationships, scaling expectations to match development, and skill building. And that's when I realized, oh, wait, I can actually like name this. But it evolved out of decades of observing and interacting with children and families.
Yeah, I love hearing a little bit more about all the ways that you do interact and serve parents and the different kind of parents that you meet. And could you tell us just a little more about some of those interactions?
So interestingly, I'm one of the few parenting coaches that I know who doesn't actually have my own children. And I'm very upfront with clients about that, because when you're a parent, your sample size is however many humans you have in your house, one child, two child, three children. And so it's really easy to focus on just their behaviors and feel like you're very alone. Because my sample size has been thousands of kids and hundreds of families over years, I can bring to it my educational background, what's going on in research and best practice. I have the time to pour into all the reading and the watching the webinars and joining the discussions, all the things that parents don't have time for. But the thing that I bring to it is that I'm not filtering what they're telling me through a lens of, well, that's not what I did with my kids. When I'm listening to a family, I'm listening to their goals, their values, their pain points. And I'm using I'm going to antiquate myself, I'm using my Rolodex of, all these thousands of kids and all of the different things that I know to have been effective with different types of kids. And that's what I'm bringing to it. So there's no judgment and there's no shame, no guilt. It's very much about who you are, what is going on in your life, and where you want to go. And it's funny, I get some raised eyebrows initially when I share that I don't have my own children. And then when people hear why that's actually of benefit in the coaching that we do, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I didn't think about it that way.
It's kind of like, I have you all to myself. Oh
yeah. And I have the energy and the time to finish it. Now, that said, my husband and I have 14 nieces and nephews who we adore, and I can't even tell you the thousands of diapers I've changed, and the thousands of hours I've spent in the trenches doing all of the hands-on stuff. So I very much understand how it feels to not shower for 3 days because the baby has colic and the toddler has a cold and you're trying to keep all the balls in the air. I've been there, so I can really empathize and help with practical sort of hands-on strategies and those little sort of tips and tricks. But those things are band-aids. Right? They're great for the short term. They're great for how do you do things when you've got a baby on one hip and a toddler and a teenager and all of that. But the underlying platform is where the real value is for the long term of parenting, because you have to parent your kids at every age. You get them when you get them, and then you parent them all the way through. So the relationships you establish with them when they're teeny become the relationships that you have with them as they're teenagers and they're adults.
Wow. So you worked in Montessori through 8th grade, you said?
Yes, through 8th grade. And I was very fortunate at this school. So I've taught in 2 countries. I'm Canadian and I live in the US now. And the school that I taught at in Canada started with Montessori toddlers. And then it went all the way up through their middle school, and their senior school were more traditional education. And they had a parallel early education program that wasn't Montessori. So the beauty of it was being able to interact and mentor. I got to chaperone outdoor ed trips for teenagers and just work with the whole age range beyond those kids who were in my classroom. And watching these kids grow. There were children who started with me at 3 and I got to watch them graduate from secondary school. So yeah, it's really beautiful when you can bring that perspective of like, they will grow up, right? There'd be times in my classroom where like a little one would be doing something and I'd be like, just remember, someday he will be a man. Someday, right? He will not be doing this forever. And that's really helpful for parents, right? This one interaction, you don't have to hold tight on this one interaction.
Yeah.
What they need from you in this moment is connection. If what they need from you in this moment is a shoulder to sob on, you've got a long time to be setting those boundaries and to be holding things tight. You can afford to drop that for right now and just focus on the nurture and the connection.
So nice. And it makes me think about, though, the philosophy of being a teacher, of being in a Montessori school, that you have this philosophy, this framework that's sort of on the horizon. It's guiding you, it's giving you this bigger perspective. And you have all the tools too that go with and not taking things as personally, because it's like, oh, that's part of development.
Yes, this is part of their development.
So how as parents, we don't get that, but so when we come to you, do you kind of help us see a more developmental or philosophical perspective, or create our own philosophy and vision?
Yeah, it's a great question. So really, it's about what each family needs. I have clients who come to me with, very, very tiny little ones, and they want to understand their developmental stage that they're in. And it's not that they're necessarily having problems, it's that they want to make sure that they're ahead of the curve. So, I've got a 2-year-old. Talk to me about what's coming up as they kind of leave toddler and go into preschool. Talk to me, we're expecting a new baby, right? Talk to me about the ways that I can continue to support this relationship with my older one while welcoming this new one. All the way through to, one of my clients has, 4 teenagers, and it feels a lot like chaos. And so they're trying to figure out, right? Where should the boundaries be? Where can we afford to be flexible? And that is something that you can't get from a book, because it's very much about who are the humans you have. Let's dig into that. Let's talk about, 4 kids, they're all going to be different, right? You can parent them exactly the same way, but the way your parenting lands on them is going to be very different for each child. So we look at the relationships first always, because if you look at yourself as being like, I'm a strict parent, I'm the type of parent where I want firm boundaries in my house and I hold them very tight. It's lovely to want those boundaries because kids need them. But if it's not steeped in really strong, connected, loving relationships, then the point of the boundaries is going to get lost. And it's just going to become more consequences, upping the ante, and like truly, and it can get to the point where, unless you're actually willing to physically restrain your kids, there's only so much a consequence can do, right? Punish means to cause pain, right? And discipline means to teach. So when you start from a place of really, really strong relationships, that's when kids and teens want to do well for you. Think about the colleagues you've had in your life, the friends you've chosen, the family members that you're more drawn to. It's the people who respect you, the people who make you feel good, the people who listen to you, the people you have fun with, right? Those are the people you want to spend time with. So one of the things, there's sort of 3 things right away when I start working with parents to build those relationships. The first thing we do is I encourage them to find the fun. Think about like little ways that you can bring more joy. Does that mean, more playful transitions? Does it mean more laughter around the dinner table? Does it mean, doing a silly walk or a silly voice to get your kids laughing? Because you can't laugh and argue at the same time. It's just, you can't do it.
Wait, slow down. I want to take this in. I want to take this in.
That big one, right? Because when you have fun with people, you wanna spend more time with them. The second piece that I really focus on is start noticing your interactions, right? When they're little, we marvel at everything they do, every babble, every spit bubble, like everything's adorable. And then they start to get older and we start putting more boundaries on and we start aiming for more discipline. Before too long, more of the interactions become, did you do your homework? Why are your shoes in the middle of the floor? It's your turn to take out the garbage, right? I've told you 1,000 times to put your dishes in the dishwasher, get off your phone. And so many of the interactions become instructions, directions, corrections, particularly as kids head into their adolescent years. Their brain gets more attuned to emotional intensity. So even if you're meaning something as very kind of innocuous feedback, they're reading it as, or they're hearing it as like, they're mad at me. Why are they being so mean to me? Right. Their
They're
perspective
judging.
on it,
Yeah.
right?
I did it wrong.
Why
Yeah.
can't they just love me the way I am? Why are they always on me? So
I remember my child saying, "You're shaming me." I was like,
I
"I'm
didn't
shaming you." My child reminding you that the dishwasher was full and needed to be emptied. That's true.
No, and it's so funny because the parents aren't wrong, right? All of the things they're doing are not wrong.
Right.
It's just, it erodes that relationship. I notice it between parents too. I do a lot of work with parents parenting on the same page, whether they are parents who are coupled, whether they are parents who have ended their relationship and are purely co-parenting. Sometimes there's grandparents or like adult children who are still living in the home and they're kind of all involved, and noticing your interactions between each other. Right? If you get home from work and it's all like, well, who's picking up so-and-so from soccer and who's going to make sure so-and-so does their homework and why isn't dinner on the table? It makes for this energy in the house, and it's no one means to. So just by noticing, I encourage parents to do a little activity where they just like pay attention for, even just like a day, not necessarily to stop themselves, just to become aware. And I have a little kind of a rule about it. I took it from a book called High Conflict. And it's, ask yourself, like, does this need to be said? Does this need to be said by me? Does this need to be said by me right now? And if the answer is no to any of those questions, just like a bit. So that's part of noticing the interactions. And then the third piece is drop the rope. There are so many things that we kind of hold tight on that are really just annoyances, or they don't actually matter in the grand scheme, but because we feel like we're the adults, we need to set these boundaries. They need to be respectful of us and our home and our space. We like turn these things into a tug of war that doesn't necessarily need to be. So when parents come to me and we're really digging into those relationships, the first three things that we work on are finding the fun, noticing your interactions, and dropping the rope. Because if your kids are walking in the door from school, your teens, however old they are, already armoring themselves for battle, right? Their nervous system is fired up because they're just waiting to be bombarded with questions about how is their day and, when are they going to start their homework and all of those things. Well-meaning, right? This is not about blaming parents for how they're interacting with their kids. They're trying to stay on top of everything. But it's so easy to lose sight of what that's doing to the underlying relationship. I was working with one family who said, well, we have dinner together every night. I said, that's amazing. What do you talk about? And they said, well, we ask all these questions. We have this list of questions that we ask. And then when we dug a little deeper, the kids they were very reluctant to come to the dinner table, and they were arguing at the dinner table. So when I gave them permission to just let it be what it is, and I gave them some different questions to ask, that were less about what their child produced that day and more about how their interactions went, right? What was something really ridiculous that happened today? Like, what was the weirdest thing that happened today? Or like, did anything happen that made you laugh, right? Those kinds of questions, who were you kind to today? Or who was kind to you? Those sorts of questions take a lot of pressure off, as opposed to how did you do on your test? What was going on with so-and-so? I know that they were fighting. Like it gives kids permission to just kind of lean into being with their parents without needing to be on edge all the time.
Letting it be a mixed salad or a stew at the dinner table rather than
just enjoy
your process.
Exactly. And silence is okay too, right? If everyone's just sort of sitting, thinking about daydreaming, daydreaming is great for the brain. So it doesn't have to be, they've just come from a whole day of interacting. And, Mona Delahook does a lot of work with body budgets. And I absolutely love the concept. It was Lisa Feldman Barrett started it when she was talking about allostasis and, the brain's role in managing all of the things that are going on and how there's only so much energy to allot to each thing. And then Mona Delahook applied it to parenting, and body budgets are a game changer for families, right? To understand, like, they're coming home from school, they've had to focus all day, they've had to be nice to people all day, they couldn't punch so-and-so on the playground when they said something stupid, like all of that takes energy, and they come home and rest. For kids who are neurodivergent, kids who are maybe masking at school, they're coming home and they're just taking that mask off, and they just want to melt into the comfort and safety and security of being with their people. And not having to worry about the damage to the relationship if they melt down or they talk back or they, aren't cooperative.
Yeah. So tell us a little more about refueling our budget.
Body budgets,
family.
They might be my new favorite thing. My husband and I have started using the term around the house. I'll be like, my body budget needs a glass of wine.
We're just talking investment here.
Right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
finances.
But it's this concept that there's only so much fuel in the tank, and things that are taxing on the body budget are paying attention and controlling your emotions is incredibly taxing on the body budget. Anytime you have to be in school and follow all these rules, socializing is very hard on the body budget, and that's in addition to the regular things, right? If you're hungry, if you're tired, if you're dehydrated, if you have to pee. So even for adults, right, if we ignore our internal sensations and we let ourselves get too hungry or too thirsty, or we don't make time to go to the bathroom, we get irritable. And that term hangry, right? That's body budget, right? You're so hungry that there's just isn't enough in your in your brain to do any thinking or to do any self-regulation. So parents are usually really good at noticing the physical stuff. They make sure their kids are fed. They know if they don't get a snack right when they get home, like, it's going to be bad news. Making sure that they are hydrated, those kinds of things. Sleep is huge for the body budget. Nothing works well when we're tired. But there are other things that are incredibly beneficial for balancing that body budget. Unstructured child-led play is incredibly beneficial for the body budget. I mean, it's crucial for human development. If we don't get enough unstructured play, it has big impacts for our brain and our healthy development down the road. So building in white spaces in your schedule where the kids can just play, whatever that looks like for them, not an organized sport, not a class, not a lesson, play. It is hugely important. Fresh air is incredibly restorative to the body budget. It cleanses the whole prefrontal cortex and kind of resets things. And being outside in nature, there's a lot of rhythm in nature. There's lapping of waves on the shore, there's rustling of leaves, there's, the pitter patter of rain. All of those things are very soothing to the nervous system. So even better if the play is happening outside, there are benefits. Movement is a big one. Physically moving your body is a beautiful way to reset the nervous system. So you're noticing that your kids are they're cranky and they're irritable, getting them up and having a dance party in the kitchen or chasing them around the house. Rough and tumble play is incredibly important. And especially when it's obviously consensual, right? The kids need to feel safe with you to know that when they tell you to stop, you're going to stop, right? Super important. But that rough and tumble play is such a great nervous system release, and playful tickling, as long as the kids are okay with it. And I
just have to tell you my little story, because we just got this big giant carrot dog toy that has all these different squeakers in it, and it's so fun. So the kids, had just started to run around with the dog squeaking her giant carrot, and you could kind of
that's exactly
use it as a sword and everything. It's just super fun.
It's play, it's laughter, it's connection with another creature, it's movement, it's all the good things. For sure. And I guess, the movement is really helpful, especially with younger children when you're asking them to transition. It's time to brush your teeth. Do you want to hop like a frog, or do you want to fly like an airplane? it gets them moving and laughing. And you're not saying, do you want to go brush your teeth? Right? You're still brushing your teeth. You're just giving them a choice in how they get there. And that movement is very playful.
I noticed you said playful transitions. I wanted to come back to that. I thought
so
playful.
important,
Playful. So airplane or dinosaur. Okay.
Right? Yeah. Do you want to hop like a frog? Do you want to hop like a bunny? It's funny. So I said we have 14 nieces and nephews, and the younger ones, right from the time that they were little, when it was time for bed, it was always do you want to? It's time for bed. Do you want to walk, or do you want to be carried like a sack of potatoes? And sack of potatoes, sack of potatoes, sack of potatoes, right? And there's never an argument about going to bed because they know that they're getting this connection and this playfulness. And I remember the last time I tried to do it, my nephew was like 10 and I was throwing him over my shoulder and carrying him up the stairs. But it's that
being carried as a sack of potatoes as a kid. It's something you don't forget. It's
right.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And it's ritual too. It's that connected ritual. They know that when Aunt Kate's there, that's something that they get to do, and those little things become rituals that build that connection and build that relationship. So, I try not to focus too much on the details about like, you have to do this thing the same way every time. There are some days where, yeah, if you say to your kid, it's time for bed, let's go, they're probably going to go pretty willingly, but other days they're not. So if you start getting in the habit of being playful with it, it just sets everyone up for success. It balances those body budgets, Another thing, especially for older kids, tweens and teens, is, when something has just happened, right? They've broken a rule, they've done something, they've made some sort of mistake. They're armoring themselves up for a lecture. They're not going to be particularly receptive to it because they're, as we know, when your nervous system fires up and you start to go into that like fight or flight, prefrontal cortex shuts down, upstairs brain offline. So give yourself permission to just in that moment, make sure everybody's safe, make sure that you understand that they're feeling some things, let them talk about what they're feeling. Unless somebody is in imminent danger, action doesn't have to happen right away. If you think about protecting the relationship first, then you can skill build later, right? You can skill build when they're more receptive to it. You can skill build when you're calmer and not feeling so amped up because they've just done something really dumb or something that feels really disrespectful. It just gives everybody a chance to protect your relationship with each other, to protect their image of themselves, to protect your image of yourself as a parent, as someone who is calm, someone who is loving. It's hard to feel that in the moment when you're screaming at your teenager for denting the car. That comes from fear too, right? Your fear is really taxing on the body budget. So knowing like protect the relationship first, skill build later. That really gives parents permission not to feel like they have to jump in right away and maybe apply a consequence that they later will realize was too harsh, or later will realize wasn't appropriate for the situation or wasn't fair or whatever. It just gives you permission to like slow everything down and you'll get to it when you get to it.
So wonderful. Yeah. So we talked about like changing the habits that we grew up with.
Yeah.
Like the things where we would get in trouble or we would or not be seen, and it reminds me of the shelter moms you're working with too, on just changing the generational patterns with these beautiful protecting the relationship is just so different and so dear, sweet.
And everyone, doesn't matter how wonderful your parents were and how well-meaning and how loving, right? No one gets through life without some trauma, right? Whether it's big T trauma or little T trauma, there's always stuff. Everybody's got stuff. And having an understanding of how that contributes to your reactions to things, right? What it does to your brain, and giving yourself permission to understand the contributions other people have made to your circumstances and the contributions you've made to your circumstances without the need to blame. And it's because if you feel, I noticed this with the mamas I was working with at the shelter, they feel so protective of their own parents, and they feel badly about some of the choices they've made that are the same as what their parents did. So if it's like they feel like if they're blaming their parents, they also have to blame themselves. And blame is such a useless emotion, right? It keeps you in the past. It keeps you stuck. It doesn't allow for kind of clear perspective. It brings shame. It really shuts you down. But contributions, that gives you power, right? And we do a lot of work on understanding where you have the power to be a protective factor for your kids. And that by taking, really harsh punishments, by taking physical punishment off the table, by taking, screaming, by taking shame, by taking isolation and timeouts, off the table, then it allows for you to open up to these beautiful relationships and really be the protective factor that kids need to keep them safe and to keep them healthy through their whole lives.
Yeah, and guilt too. Guilt.
Oh.
I remember my mom apologizing to me, and then I found I was apologizing to my kid, and it was like, that doesn't really do anything. I didn't want to hear my mom say, "I'm sorry, I'm a bad parent" or something. That's the worst thing to hear. Then you have to be like, "No, you're fine. You're great." Yeah.
It's an interesting point. The real value for the relationships is not in never making mistakes, right? You're going to yell at your kids sometimes, right? You're gonna mess up. You're gonna handle things in a way that later you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't quite done that. Your kids are gonna mess up, and you're gonna wish they had done things differently. But the repair is what matters, and an apology can be a really valuable part of that repair, as long as it comes with action, repair and understanding. And this was something that I worked with the mamas at the shelter, because many of them came from abusive backgrounds. And there's a big difference between a genuine repair, where you're acknowledging that things didn't go the way you had hoped they would, that you are sorry, and that you want to do things differently. That's very different than like a cycle of abuse. And so helping them understand that by saying to their kids, like, yeah, I made a mistake. You were trying to tell me something. I was tired. My body budget was running very low, and I got angry with you instead of listening to you. And I'm sorry for that. I'm ready to listen to you now, that kind of thing. And kids are so forgiving, and they just want to be connected to you. So when you show them that you genuinely care and that you are sorry for what happened, it also opens the door to talking about what can be done differently next time. And that's the skill build, right? The repair is the relationship build. And then the skill build is, let's problem solve this together. How can we work it out so that, when I come home from work and that my body budget is low, and I know that your body budget is low, like, what can we do so that we can have a really nice interaction together, instead of, getting snippy with each other, or whatever that looks like. And some of that is Ross Green, collaborative and proactive solutions, right? If something is consistently an issue, you can problem solve that, and have kids involved in it. So it's all relationships and skills, through that lens of what is, a 2-year-old cannot skill build the way that a 12-year-old can, and a 12-year-old can't the way that a 17-year-old can. So, understanding where they're at developmentally and how they perceive the world. Kids who have, sensory challenges, kids who are autistic, right? They all see the world. The world comes at them differently. And by listening to them and understanding what is real for them, we can really support them and support those relationships.
I love them as humans. They're humans. They're humans. We're humans.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it was the difference between kind of an overall arching feeling of shame or guilt, that you can't really work with that. Like you were saying, you kind of have to clear that out and then get specific about an interaction. And I remember just admitting that I make mistakes to my kids was such a huge relief.
Right?
like, we all make mistakes. Now we can have a conversation. Like, just
I mean, guilt is useful, right? This is kind of Gordon Neufeld and Brene Brown, right? Guilt is useful. Like if you do something unkind to someone else, you're supposed to feel guilty, right? That's how that's the thing that tells you, right? Remorse. That's the thing that tells you like, wow, I need to make amends here. I messed up, right? That's super important. If we lose our ability to feel remorse or to feel like we've, like there's some work that we need to do to make something better, that's a problem. It's shame that's useless, right? Because shame is like, I am a bad person, as opposed to I made a mistake and did something. You know, and kids are supposed to feel the whole range of human emotions. I think this is part of the relationship piece, is that because kids feeling feelings is messy, right? Kids feeling anger, frustration, disappointment, joy, they feel it big, they feel it loud, they feel it all over the place. And as adults, we forget that that's totally developmentally appropriate. They don't have that upstairs brain yet to help them regulate those emotions. And we love the joy, but we get really uncomfortable with the messiness of their frustration, their fear, their anger, their disappointment, their expectation gap. They wanted something this way and it ended up being this way. We forget that if we want them to be adults who can feel the whole range of emotions, process the whole range of emotions, and act appropriately on those emotions, we got to let them feel them when they're little and co-regulate with them and help them have practice at going from that fired up to that calm. And then as their brains mature and as they have us practicing with them, those things together give them a healthy, adult. But we get scared when we see these emotions because we think, well, gosh, if they're tantruming, they're going to turn into an entitled adult. I have to nip this. This is not okay. And we just don't realize that it's just part of the process for them. And then we have all these adults who are emotionally stunted, not comfortable feeling feelings, fixing using alcohol or drugs or, gambling or shopping or any of these other things to try and numb, either to give them more of the good stuff that they want to feel or to numb the bad stuff. Because when they were little, they were very well behaved because they were afraid of consequences, but they weren't allowed to feel and actually learn to process it. So it's really a long game that we're playing, parents and teens. And it's based in those relationships for sure.
That is so beautiful, to give back the whole spectrum of being human and the depth of feelings that we have to ourselves, to our kids.
That's how we're built. To feel, and it looks different for everybody. And people express it in different ways, but being seen by those people who are supposed to love you exactly as you are, that unconditional love, that's the key to those relationships. Doesn't mean you can't set boundaries. I'm not advocating for a life without accountability, without rules in the family, right? Kids need boundaries. They need fair, reasonable boundaries, because without that, they don't feel safe. They feel like they have to be protecting themselves. And that's when you see a lot of aggression or a lot of, they're acting like the alpha because they don't trust that there are grownups around to keep them safe. So by all means, setting boundaries is important, but they need to be done within the context of those really strong relationships and those understanding of development. Scaling your
Can we end with you telling us maybe a case study, a little story of maybe one of your shelter moms and just
in order to protect confidentiality, I have to be very limited in the information that I share with them.
Of course.
But I can tell you that it's really interesting. Many of them had been in parenting classes before, where they were sort of sat down and told, this is what you need to do. These are the rules. This is how you do it. And because I use the GPS approach, which starts with get it off your chest and protecting those relationships, the very first session, the first thing I said to them was, I am not a therapist. I am a coach. My role is to take you from where you are now and move you forward. So tell me about your kids. Bam, floodgates opened. Everybody wanted to talk about their kids. It was get it off your chest. right?
I love that.
All about their children. They told me all about their goals for their children, all the things that they were dreaming about for their children. And then we talked about what's getting in the way, right? And that they needed that, get it off your chest, right?
Yeah.
And then the next session was about protecting relationships and starting to understand development, right? So every time we would go through protect relationships, understand development and skill build. There were elements of that in every session. But once we built that relationship, it was interesting how fast we went from people sitting back doing this to people doing this and writing notes and being engaged and wanting to share and wanting to ask questions and wanting to learn. And it's truly, it's a microcosm for what we can do as parents, as educators, right? When you allow people to share fully what they're feeling and what they're thinking, and you come at it from protecting and building relationships first.
Yes.
That's the key to everything. And
yes.
From there, the skill building can.
Yes. The first thing they got to find out is I love my kids. I have a vision for them.
Exactly. And I want something different for them than what I have. And so that's why we were able to focus a lot on, if you want something different for them, then you need to start doing some things differently. And I gave them really tangible goals and tangible rationale for what to do differently and how that was going to have the biggest impact. I'm not asking them to be different people, right? Be who you are and start trying some things differently that are going to have the biggest impact on your kids, for you to be their protective factors and for them to develop that self-regulation. Because we know healthy teens and adults who kind of get through life without being addicted, without significant mental health challenges, they've had people as protective factors in their life, and they have the ability to self-regulate. And brains that have had a lot of trauma really struggle with self-regulation. So it's why folks who struggle with addiction, self-regulation is a challenge, right? So we want to build those relationships, build that base, and then skill build from there.
Beautiful. Oh, this has been so wonderful.
Thank you for the opportunity
talking to you
to come on and chat with you. I appreciate it very much.
Oh yes, it's an honor, and it's also just I feel so excited that it's sharing it in a community that's growing here.
I'm excited to hear people's feedback, and if they have questions, anything. I love connecting with parents is my favorite thing. That's why I turned it into my career. So I love listening and hearing about all the wins and hearing about all the challenges. And so I'd love if folks want to connect.
Oh, wonderful. And have you brought a gift to help promote connection?
I have brought a gift. So I brought a guide. It's called 10 Tips for Getting Your Kids and Teens to Listen. And it's very much based in the relationships and the skill building. But often from parents, what I hear is, I just want them to listen. Like, why won't they listen to me? I'm being reasonable. I'm asking nicely. What is going on? And so this is a guide.
I'm excited to see it. I bet it's a unique look, because everything I've learned from you is a little bit of a deeply knowledgeable, experienced, unique look at things.
It's a bit of a twist. It's a bit of a twist. You will not find any timeouts in my work.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you. I'm gonna just thank you and thank the audience for joining us. And
thank you to everyone who's watching. I really appreciate their time and their interest. And stay tuned, because I'm working on a book that I'm hoping published by the end of the year. And so this is now that I've said that out loud, that it should be published by the end of the year. Now it has to happen. So,
and it'll have the same title about
it will, yes.
Because
kids don't come with a roadmap, a 4-part platform for raising great humans.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. Thank you all.
Take care.
Bye-bye.